This is such an interesting and awesome topic. Let's see what the creator says and get into it. Substituting a trap bar jump for some type of power clean or hang clean variation, we have to answer one question right off the bat that will help justify this as a valid or invalid argument. What is the end goal? What are you trying to train? What are you trying to get better at? This one is great. An overarching kettlebell swing substituted for a snatch. Dive into this one very deep right now. So the eccentric, specifically the high speed eccentric loading that comes from a high kettlebell swing such as this is nowhere near the high speed eccentric loading you're going to get from that snatch overhead. Thus, I do see why this could not be a great substitute for the snatch. You're not getting as violent hip extension, you're not getting as much eccentric loading, and you're really not getting all that dynamic power throughout the body when you're swinging an overhead kettlebell swing like that. However, if we increase the load, we could increase those forces, but it's still not going to be the sufficient enough for the clean or the snatch. And the last one, some type of dynamic granny toss substitute for a very heavy clean. These are great questions, great topics, and it really boils down to our first question. What are you trying to train? What are you trying to get better at? And what's the stimulus that you need to get better at for your sport? In the strength world, there's many different camps. Here we're talking, should we do Olympic lifts or should we not? My experience tells me that we should have both, and here's the reason why. Number one, the main thing that cannot be trained with a barbell is high speed eccentric loading. And anybody that says it can mimic or even get close to the high speed eccentric loading of a sprint doesn't know the research, has never dove into it, and really does not understand the strength and conditioning world. The amount of high speed eccentric loading in a sprint cannot be matched with any barbell, any kettlebell, any med ball, but we try to get as close as we can so that we can get better and have adaptations so these athletes can be better on their competition floor. Let's get into specific detail. The first variations were trap bar jumps or clean variations. I love trap bar jumps and I do a lot of cleans and I love cleans. However, they both are going to train something a little bit different. And the thing that this gentleman is talking about, in my opinion, is the clean is going to have more violent hip extension and it's going to have a higher eccentric load on the way down. However, with these trap bar jumps, we're getting a much more powerful concentric motion, and how he's catching it, you are getting an eccentric load when you are catching the barbell or the trap bar. Thus, it boils down to, what are you trying to get better at? And in my opinion, if we're trying to really pick straws between a trap bar and a clean, maybe we should just do both or just do one and do sprinting. Lots and lots of sprinting. Now onto the kettlebell swing and the snatch, and I'm in 100% agreement with the creator on this one. With the snatch compared to the kettlebell, you're going to have way better hip extension, more violent hip extension that's going to match most sports. You're also going to have way more eccentric loading when you're catching that bar. You're going to have great trunk activation, and if you have the prerequisite shoulder mobility, it's going to be great for your shoulders to be in that overhead position. However, that doesn't mean that we can just throw away the kettlebell swing. In my opinion, for having a beginner or an intermediate or even a veteran, the barrier to entry with a kettlebell swing is much, much lower than a snatch. Biggest thing here is, what is our bang for our buck and what is the risk versus reward? Are we really getting way more out of this exercise where we could do this alternative that's going to give us 90% and exactly what we need? That's the question you have to ask. Lastly, the med ball granny toss, how he was doing it was incorrect, and I'll tell you why, compared to the clean. This is where we will probably disagree. In the barbell movements, these are a very controlled movement. Okay, we go from point A to point B and back to point A. With the clean, with the snatch, we only can pull the bar so far. We can only produce so much force to get it where it needs to be, and then it has to come down and we have to catch it. That is the biggest difference with this med ball granny toss and the clean variation. The reason I say that, when we do a med ball granny toss, this is an open loop exercise. There's no limits. You get outside, there are no limits on the force that you can produce with a med ball. Plus, if you're doing it right and throwing it as hard as you possibly can and you're outside, you are having infinite ability to produce force with that med ball. But with the clean, you're only pulling it so far. You can increase the load, don't get me wrong, but you can only pull it so far in that bar path, and then you have to catch it and absorb that force. The one thing that is superior with these, the clean variation is going to have more eccentric loading. The granny toss is going to have zero eccentric loading besides you landing on the ground. So here's my opinion with my little boy right here. We can do both, but the biggest thing that's missing is not the difference between a kettlebell swing and a snatch. It's the difference between doing these explosive movements and sprinting. Sprinting is the key. That will have more eccentric loading than all of them combined. So make sure you're doing your sprints, make sure you're doing your Olympic lifts, and jump with a trap bar every once in a while. That's my take.